There's a ton of Pokemon that players often do not look at as top tier, but in many cases, they could actually be some of the best raid attackers and even really solid Pokemon for PvP. And for many players, they might be sitting on these Pokemon without realizing that they are top tier when it comes to raid battles and PvP. And that's precisely what I'm going to be talking about. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Pokemon which are often underrated and actually are really good. Hey, how's it going everyone? Jinsula here with a brand new Pokemon GO video. I hope your day is going really well, and let's get right into it. So today we're going to be talking about 10 Pokemon which I believe are very powerful game changers, but a lot of players often overlook them. The reason for that is because most of them are not legendary Pokemon, and others are Pokemon that have been in the game for quite some time, so they kind of just fell off. People just stopped paying attention to them. And of course, there's a bunch of these Pokemon that have a much powerful version which a lot of players will tend to focus in on, but if you do not have 6 of those super powerful Pokemon, you could often use any of the Pokemon that I'm going to be talking about as a solid replacement for your raid teams. And before we get into the list, if you end up enjoying this video, make sure you hit the subscribe button for my channel and you'll get more content just like this one. Alright, let's kick things off with one Pokemon which I have not heard a lot about. I don't think a lot of players are aware that this Pokemon is actually really good. And this Pokemon is a recent addition, so that might be the reason, but it's going to be Glimmora. Glimmora is a Pokemon which can be a very powerful rock type, and I think a lot of players are sleeping on it. If you do not have really good rock types in your collection, Glimmora might actually be a really good option. There's going to be a lot of rock types in this list actually, mainly because when it comes to rock types, we really do not have much outside of Tyranitar as well as Rampardos, but yeah, aside from those two Pokemon, we really do not see that many rock types get used. However, there's a lot of legendary raid bosses that are weak against rock type attacks, so Glimmora is a really good option. If you happen to have one that's really good, yeah, it might be worth bringing to a raid, mainly because you're going to deal quite a lot of damage. Next up, let's talk about a Pokemon which I think a lot of players tend to forget is a very powerful Pokemon, and it is going to be a starter Pokemon, and it is none other than Blaziken. Now, among starter Pokemon, I think there's plenty of others that are just a lot more iconic, and mainly they're going to be seen as a more powerful option, but I would say Blaziken is actually really good. For one, it does have a Mega Evolution, which makes it top tier, but two, it could be used as either a top tier fire type or as well as a fighting type, so it has a lot of versatility. I really do think that Blaziken is one of those Pokemon that if you were to max it out and if you were to use it, it could even outperform some legendaries. So yeah, I will say this is one of those Pokemon that a lot of players might be sitting on and not realizing it is incredibly powerful. Now, speaking of legendaries, there are going to be a couple of legendaries on this list, mainly because I think for some players, they do not realize just how powerful they can actually be. The first of these is going to be Kartana. Now, I know what you're already thinking. Yeah, Kartana has always been well known as a very powerful Pokemon, especially when it comes to grass types, but it's actually a very powerful generalist. And on top of that, don't forget it also has the steel typing. I think Kartana is a very solid Pokemon that players tend to forget about. I think a lot of people just think of it as a niche Pokemon just specifically for raid bosses that are weak against grass types, but I think Kartana is actually a lot more useful compared to that. I mean, I've used Kartana when it comes to Team Go Rocket battles, Team Go Rocket leader battles, that sort of thing. It's a very powerful glass cannon. It could be a very powerful Pokemon in general, and I think you should use it outside of those very occasional raids where they're just specifically weak against grass types. And another grass type that is going to be on this list is one that I think a lot of players have forgotten is actually top tier, especially when it comes to grass type attacks as well as flying type attacks, and that is going to be Forme Shaymin. Shaymin is one of those mythical Pokemon that a lot of players kind of treat as one and done. As soon as they got their Shaymin, they just kind of forgot about it, but Forme Shaymin is actually really good. On top of it being a pretty decent Pokemon for PvP in certain cups, it's also a really good raid attacker. In a very similar way as Kartana, sometimes it could be seen as a bit niche, but I actually think it is a very powerful Pokemon. And if you're lacking in really powerful Pokemon, but you completed the special research for Forme Shaymin, then yeah, you should power it up. It could prove to be extremely useful until you get some of those top tier Pokemon. Next up, this is going to be another Pokemon that people are going to say, yeah, this is not necessarily underrated. A lot of people actually do use this Pokemon, but I don't often hear a lot of people saying, yeah, this is a very clutch Pokemon, but it's going to be Rhyperior. Rhyperior is a classic Pokemon. It's one of the OGs. I think a lot of longtime players already have a bunch of really powerful Rhyperior, but because it is often considered overclassed by a lot of other Pokemon that are legendaries, people tend to forget about Rhyperior, especially newer players. If you're a newer player that just started playing the game and you're looking for a ground type or a rock type to use in raid battles, but you have a whole bunch of Rhyperior in your collection, well, those are the Pokemon you should be using. It is a very powerful Pokemon, and longtime players like myself will always say that Rhyperior is just a solid choice when it comes to raids, and even in PvP. In certain specialty cups, it could actually prove to be useful. I think in the Premier Master League, it is a very powerful Pokemon. This is definitely one of those that if you were to power it up, you could definitely progress in the game with it. So yeah, Rhyperior is very much well deserving to be on this list. Now, the next Pokemon that I'm going to be talking about is one that I don't often hear get talked about when it comes to certain raid bosses, but it's going to be Galarian Darmanitan. Now, when it comes to Darmanitan, this is a very powerful Pokemon in and of itself, but the Galarian version is a very powerful Ice type, and because when it comes to Ice type raid damage, you don't often really see Darmanitan get put into the mix, into the conversation. I think a big part of that is because of the fusion forms for Kyurem, as well as with Mamoswine. Those have always been kind of like the classic Ice type raid attackers, but Galarian Darmanitan is actually really good. And if you do not have any of the Pokemon that I just listed, but you have a bunch of Galarian Darmanitan, yeah, you should be using those. They're definitely worth powering up because in certain situations, you might just need a solid Ice type, and it's going to be not that expensive as well, because Darmanitans are not really difficult to get. Getting the candies to power them up is also not difficult to get, so I do think that this is definitely one of those Pokemon you should not sleep on. Now, the next Pokemon that I'm going to be talking about is another rock type. I did mention there's going to be quite a few rock types in this list, and I will say this is a Pokemon that ever since it got a community day, people have been continuously sleeping on it, and I still think it's a pretty decent rock type raid attacker, and in some cases it might be good in PvP. And I'm of course talking about Gigalith. Now, Gigalith is not going to be an absolute game changer. It's not going to be an S tier Pokemon by any means, but if you're lacking in Pokemon that are going to be the top tier, yeah, you could use Gigalith. It's a very powerful Pokemon. Again, it's a rock type, which gives you rock type raid damage, which is a little bit rare. And then of course, Gigalith is just all around really good in terms of tankiness and survivability. So yeah, Gigalith is a very useful Pokemon. Don't sleep on it. It could actually prove to be useful, and a lot of newer players who do not have a lot of powerful Pokemon, they could find a lot of use for Gigalith. So yeah, definitely worth using in certain raids. And going along the same vein, we have another Pokemon that actually wasn't underrated for a while, but it kind of fell off recently, and I still think it's really good. And this is going to be Hydreigon. Now, when it comes to dark types, there are of course much better options out there. I think Tyranitar, once it got Brutal Swing, kind of took over as the absolute best dark type, but I will say Hydreigon is really good. The one thing it has going against it is that it doesn't have any kind of Mega Evolution or anything like that, and it also has the Dragon typing as well, so certain raid bosses might be strong against it, but I will say when it comes to dark type raid damage, it's a very solid Pokemon, and you should not sleep on it. If you're lacking in really good dark types, again, Hydreigon is a really good option, and in some cases, it might prove to be very useful because of that Dragon typing alongside the dark typing, like for example with Team Go Rocket battles. So yeah, I will say Hydreigon is a very powerful Pokemon that might be considered underrated at this point. Alright, and we're coming across the last two Pokemon, and I will say there is a bit of a theme with these two Pokemon. I don't necessarily feel like they're overly underrated. I think some players tend to just overlook them, just not necessarily realizing their full potential. And I really do think that's a mistake, because both of these Pokemon that I'm about to list, they are S tier. They are actually some of the best Pokemon in the game, just players do not recognize them as that. And the first one of these is going to be Keldeo. Now Keldeo of course has two different forms, and I think both forms are incredibly powerful, but just in general, this is a very strong fighting type, and in most cases it's going to be top tier. So I do think Keldeo is a very powerful Pokemon. It is one of those that most players will have if they completed the special research, and I think it's definitely going to be one that will help you progress. So if you have a Keldeo, you're a newer player, and you do not really have a lot of fighting types, then yeah, you should power up a Keldeo and use it. It's very good. And actually, the last Pokemon on this list is one of my personal favorite Pokemon, but often I don't see players talking about it. They feel like it's not going to be top tier, they feel like it gets overshadowed by Pokemon like Lucario, and it's actually a fighting and rock type. So yeah, it's another rock type on this list. It's going to be none other than Terrakion. Now, when it comes to the Swords of Justice Pokemon, of course Terrakion has always been considered the one that you need to get out of the three. I will say though, it is a lot more powerful than a lot of players give it credit for, especially when it comes to raid battles, gym battles, and a lot of other content. It's going to be really good. The one thing about Terrakion is, of course, it's not really good in PvP. You're not going to find many Terrakion in the Master League, for example, within the top ranks, but it is really good when it comes to PvE content. It's one of my go-to Pokemon. I think I've used a Terrakion. I have 100% Terrakion with Sacred Sword. I've probably used that Pokemon the most out of most Pokemon in my collection. Yeah, it's really useful. I really do think you should not sleep on Terrakion. You're going to end up being able to take on a lot of raid bosses, take down more gyms with this one Pokemon alone. And yeah, that's pretty much it. These are the 10 Pokemon which I believe are underrated, not talked about enough, or people do not recognize just how powerful they actually are. I really do think that if you have these Pokemon, and especially if you're just starting off in Pokemon GO and you don't have too many Pokemon in your collection, these are definitely 10 Pokemon that will get you very far in this game. I really do think you should not sleep on these Pokemon, especially if you are looking for really solid choices with what they bring. And yeah, let me know your thoughts regarding all the Pokemon that I talked about down below. Do you feel like there's other Pokemon that players are sleeping on that they should not be? Do you feel like some of these Pokemon actually shouldn't be on this list, that you feel like they are actually something that players recognize as really good? Or do you feel like some of them are not actually good and there's actually better options? Share all those thoughts in the comments. Let's have a great discussion. And if you enjoyed this video and you want to support my channel, best way you could do that is by hitting the like button for this video. That would help me out a lot. And also, make sure you subscribe if you haven't done so already. That would be a huge help, and don't forget the notification bell as well. And also, check out the links in the description below. One of them is to my Patreon page. If you want to play Pokemon GO with me, best way you could do that is by becoming a Patreon member. So yeah, go and check that out. Again, a link to it is in the description below. And yeah, that's it. I'm Jinsula. Be safe, have fun, love yourself today, and I'll catch you in the next video.